Hi, my name is Sandra Weiss, and today my topic is the ancient civilizations' need for water. All early civilizations have developed in areas near large bodies of water or along river valleys. Mesopotamia developed along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, Egypt along the Nile River, China along the Yellow, and India along the Indus River. Civilizations formed along these rivers because they provided places to hunt and fish, they were a means of transportation, and they provided a much needed, consistent supply of water. Water was essential to the development of these civilizations. The land along the rivers was fertile, allowing for crops to be grown. The land further away from the rivers was dry and mostly uninhabitable. This is where irrigation comes into play. In areas that had little or irregular precipitation, irrigation provided farmers the ability to grow much better and bigger crops on a more consistent schedule. This made it possible for them to build up a surplus of food that could be traded or stored for times of low harvest. This surplus also made it possible for some residents to not participate in food production, which led to the development of distinct specialized roles and associated classes. Irrigation may be the single most important environmental modification humans have learned to perform and underlies many of the world's greatest civilizations. Without water, crops cannot be grown, and the development of large populated areas is directly due to the ability of farmers to feed them. Irrigation and other water technology devised by the ancient societies helped to promote population growth and urbanization and brought with it economic, social, legal, and political ramifications. Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, and Rome all developed along rivers, but the obstacles they had to overcome to supply water and to irrigate all differed based on the characteristics of the river and the area in which they lived. In Mesopotamia, rainfall is low, and farmers relied on the flooding Tigris and Euphrates as their main source of water. Farmers diverted water from the rivers through a series of dikes, dams, and canals. During times of high water, the farmers opened the dikes to allow water and rich silt to flow into the fields. Once the silt settled, they allowed the water to drain back into the canal. Egypt's main source of water was the Nile River. The Nile flooded on a predictable and regular schedule. This worked well for the Egyptians, who used the technique of basin irrigation to water their fields. Silt-laden floodwaters from the Nile River would flow into the basins. After the water drained into the soil, which usually took about a month, farmers would plant their crops. The Egyptians also used canals and water-lifting machines for perennial irrigation. The Chinese used the Yellow River for their primary source of water. This river flowed very strong and forcefully, carrying large amounts of silt with it. This silt built up in the riverbed, raising it higher. The Yellow River was also prone to great floods. This was a challenge for the Chinese, who had to continually dredge irrigation canals to keep them flowing or build higher dikes to keep the river at bay. Chinese engineers had to balance protecting the cities from flooding and irrigating fields at the same time. Rome developed along the Tiber River. They did not need to develop irrigation canals as there was plenty of rainfall in the area. They did, however, build drainage ditches to drain water from surrounding marshy areas, making them amenable to agriculture. The main obstacle in Rome was lack of good drinking water. The Tiber River was brackish and unhealthy for drinking. The Romans overcame this by building aqueducts to carry fresh water in from lakes and springs. All of these technologies to supply water and irrigate crops helped early civilization to grow and develop. When exploring the technology used by these ancient civilizations, it is important to use a variety of sources. These sources include analyzing aerial photographs, looking at the remains of ancient ditches, machines, or aqueducts, and the evaluation of ancient paintings and written evidence. This will give a better picture of how the development of irrigation and water technology helped to develop civilization and how it affected it economically, socially, legally, and politically. First into evidence is an aerial photograph of a pre-Roman city in Italy, which is from source number 1, Wisner et al. Looking at the photograph, you can clearly see a network of ancient drainage ditches. These are the black lines in the photograph. The large black line in the upper left corner is most likely one of the main drainage ditches, and the smaller black lines are likely secondary ditches. The lighter areas in between lines are the plots of land used for farming. The plots of land are unequal in size, indicating that land was not divided up evenly. Some pieces of land are very small and not able to produce as large of a crop as other parcels. This would affect the farmer economically, as they would not have as much surplus. The land all appears to be pretty flat, so silting should not be a problem. The canals are all interconnected, so it would be important for each farmer to properly maintain their drainage ditch so as not to affect his neighbor's land and crops. Source number 2 is Landsat imagery of the central floodplains of the Euphrates. Agriculture was only possible in that area with the help of irrigation, as Mesopotamia received very little rainfall and the soil was very hot and dry. This imagery shows a very extensive, intricate water supply system. Digging canals required a lot of people to join in a collective effort to construct them. It would have taken a large amount of manpower to build and maintain such an extensive system. Source number 3 is a depiction of an early Egyptian king cutting and irrigation ditch, drawn from mace head carving 3100 BCE. It portrays the king holding a hoe, flanked by 2 palm fan holders. In front of him is a worker holding a basket of dirt. The 2 more workers are seen digging a ditch. This depiction suggests a strong connection between power and water. Water enjoyed a sacred presence in Egyptian civilizations, taking a central role in rites and rituals. The Egyptian kings were considered to be divine deities as well as mortal rulers. The king was the absolute ruler and owner of all the land, water, and people in his kingdom. He would make all decisions regarding the building of irrigation ditches and water usage. This depiction highlights the importance of irrigation and agriculture to their society. Control of water was one of several factors that contributed to the emergence of the ruling class and bureaucracy. Sometimes canals, dikes, and dams weren't enough to get water to the fields. During times the river was low, farmers had to use water lifters to fill the irrigation canals. Sources 4 through 7 are sketches of water lifters used in ancient societies for irrigating. Number 1 is the shaduf. A shaduf is a large pole balanced on a crossbeam, a rope and bucket on one end and a counterweight at the other. Pulling the rope lowered the bucket into the water. Pulling down on the counterweight would raise the bucket out of the water. The shaduf was not practical for irrigating large areas. The next water lifter was the sakia, a complex water lifter consisting of a vertical wooden wheel geared to a horizontal wheel, which is slung with a chain of buckets and powered by oxen. The buckets would travel down into a well and draw water to the apex of the wheel, where it pours into a trough, then to a series of channels to the farmer's field. This type of water lifter would be expensive to build and involves digging a well. It also necessitates caring for the animals that are used to operate it. I would not expect the average farmer to be able to afford this water lifter and would guess it would have to be shared by several farmers. The square pallet chain pump could haul large amounts of water up from lower levels to higher levels. It consisted of an endless circulating chain bearing square pallets with which hold water. It seems to be a simpler design and could lift more water than the sakia. It needed 2 men to operate the machine by pedaling, taking them away from other kinds of labor. The noria was another machine used to raise water for irrigation. It was a large wheel powered by the current of the flowing river. It operated independent of man and animal power. The water wheel lifted water up from the river into a trough, which then carried the water to the field. The benefit of this water lifter is that it allowed the farmer to be involved in other labor as it was fully autonomous. Water was the most precious resource in ancient societies. It was so important that the Code of Hammurabi, source number 8, contains many laws and regulations regarding irrigation. The Code of Hammurabi required the farmers to maintain their irrigation ditches and dikes or pay reparation to landowners whose crops and land were damaged due to another's negligence. The many farm and irrigation laws contained in the Code of Hammurabi tell us that the Babylonians depended on their crops for survival. Shao Shichen of the Han Dynasty, source number 11, also formulated regulations concerning the equitable distribution of water. The laws were inscribed on stones and placed at the boundaries of fields to prevent water disputes. Low rainfall, inadequate water supply, dependency on one major water source, combined with population growth and urbanization, were a recipe for these disputes. In source number 12, Frontius's discussion of Rome's water systems shows how the growing complexity and scale of both urban water supply and rural irrigation systems require the development of laws to regulate usage and protect both the rights and interests of property owners, users of the water, and owner of the aqueduct system. The aqueduct systems were large and spanned over many properties. This required rules and regulations to protect all parties involved. The right to water was not inherited or bought, but was granted to a person. Another issue in Rome was puncturers, who basically stole water by puncturing a pipe and attaching another access to divert water elsewhere, such as to a private home or business. Source number 9, Sima Qian's description of the building of the Zhengao Canal demonstrates the political struggles over water. The Prince of Han, wanting to drain the resources of the state of Qin, sent an engineer, Zhen Gao, to persuade the king of Qin to build a 100-mile-long canal from Qing River all the way to Low River. The king agreed, but halfway through found out about Zhen Gao's deception. The king wanted to kill him, but Zhen Gao told him what a great benefit the canal would be to the state of Qin, so he continued with the project. When the canal was finished, they had much more fertile land, and Qin became very rich and powerful and conquered all of the feudal states. This is a perfect demonstration of the power of irrigation and agriculture. Water is now and has always been our most precious resource, and as an instrument, and also an instrument of survival. Water technology and irrigation underlie many of the greatest civilizations, helping to promote growth and urbanization. Without irrigation, we would have no cities and would most likely be living nomadic lives, hunting and gathering. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Have a good day.